This is number 53 in Chapter 9. It's looking at putting together Lewis dot structures with covalent systems. And I'm going to do Part C and Part D. We're looking at Part C, which is HCOOH, and they give us a clue that say both oxygens are bonded to a carbon. And so if we put this structure together, we want to first put our carbon atom in the middle. We're going to put carbon in the middle because it has the most unpaired electrons. It's also going to be the least electronegative comparatively with the oxygen, so we'll put that in the middle. And then we're going to start to put the structure together. One clue that's given to us is both oxygens are bound to carbon, so let's begin by doing that. And so we end up with those two oxygens bound to our carbon. Our carbon still isn't happy yet. It now has 6 electrons around it, and so it needs to have 2 more. And so one thought process might be to put a hydrogen here and a hydrogen at the bottom. That is incorrect. We have a problem if we look at the structure. While carbon and hydrogen are satisfied with being isoelectronic with neon or helium respectively, oxygen only has 7 valence electrons around it, and there is no charge on this molecule, so we aren't getting extra electrons because of the charge. So this structure is incorrect. But we know that the 2 oxygens are actually bound to that carbon. So what's another way we can orient this? And so let's put our hydrogen to one of the carbon, and then we will take the other hydrogen and bind it to one of the oxygens. And so we end up with this structure. And now we're actually fairly close. We have one of the oxygens with its octet. The 2 hydrogens are happy, and now the carbon and the oxygen above the carbon both need 1 electron, and so they are going to share those by forming a double bond. And so the next structure that we would have would be now a double bond between the top oxygen and the carbon, and then we have our carbon bound to the OH. And now every element is satisfied with its octet, and then if we were to draw this using our bonds, we would end up with this structure for formic acid. So that is Part C. Part D looks at CH3SH, and they give us a clue by saying the sulfur and the carbon are in the middle of the molecule. And so let's just begin with the carbon first. Carbon has its 4 unpaired electrons, and so a quick thing to do would be to put hydrogens at the terminus. Remember, hydrogens only ever want to have 1 bond, and so we can end up with this part of the structure. We still have a sulfur and a hydrogen to deal with, and so obviously we don't want to put a hydrogen here, because then that would mean hydrogen would be in the middle of the molecule. So the next step is to put in really that sulfur. And so if we put in our sulfur, we use one of its unpaired electrons to make the bond between carbon and sulfur. Now carbon is happy. Sulfur just needs 1 more electron, and it gets that from that last hydrogen. And so we end up with the structure for mercaptomethanol here to be equal to this. Again, each element trying to get 8 electrons around it. We begin with the most unpaired, which is carbon, and then we start to put the puzzle together. That's number 53.